outreach for the Trust, and just wanted to start by giving an update on where we are with our virtual programming for the season. As all of you know, COVID has changed the landscape a lot in terms of how we're typically running our programs. Normally this time of year, we're in the middle of our Summer of Fun, which brings tens of thousands of people to the park and experiencing our programs. But due to restrictions in the park, we have kind of retooled everything to really capitalize on some virtual opportunities, as well as different ways to engage with science. So to start the season, we had done a number of surveys to the general public and then to key outreach groups to figure out what people were looking for in their programming and what areas we could really fill needed gaps in programming in New York City. So we found that really there were needs in terms of adult programming for music and entertainment. So our Sunset Salsa series, as well as music series like Sunset on the Hudson, are now performing in a virtual fashion online via Facebook Live. And then expanding some of our science programs, we realized the importance that kids are now learning on the computer. They're on in front of screens all day. So a lot of our programming has been focused on creating different digital resources for families and students to engage with. So back in April, we started our STEM Activity of the Week series. It's a totally free online series that people can download lessons focused on the river. And then just starting this past month, we kicked off our virtual summer camp. Again, all these hands-on lessons that can be downloaded and done off screen. But then in addition, we really want to bring the river to everyone. So we have different science programs focused on engaging the research and the restoration work happening in the park with the public, such as our Ask a Scientist program, where we share a research topic and then invite the public to ask questions and answers. So all of that's happening via Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and then on the website itself for downloading. We're happy to send a list of all the programs and resources. And then I know, Kira, you were going to mention some of the outreach and ways that we're sharing this with our community as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. I'm Kira Levy. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events. This year, one of the main things that changed for us was all of our outreach and the advertising efforts, so the majority of the advertising efforts that we're doing no longer have a budget associated with them. So we are re-engaging community members that we've reached out to in the past, both through our office and also through friends. And we thank them for their support there. We are relying heavily on our email database, which has been great. We have about 20,000 subscribers that we communicate with on a weekly basis, and also through social media. We've also reached out to some of our tenants, I believe all of our tenants, and other groups who have supported us in the past, either just with community initiatives or who have been paid partners of ours. So many of our sponsors who would normally support the park have had their budgets also significantly impacted because of COVID. So they are now showing, or we're continuing to engage them, and they are showing their support through promotional means versus financial if they are unable to do so that way. So again, reaching out directly to constituents, and then also through newsletters each week have been where we have focused our efforts in spreading awareness about the programs that we are putting on as the park.
And I'm Tom Linden, the VP of Marketing and Events at the Trust, and this has been an interesting learning experience for us, pivoting to the digital world. We've enjoyed putting the programs together, and the good news is we continue to engage park patrons, but we're also expanding our audience too. We're finding that as people tune into Facebook Live or into Instagram, we're seeing a lot more than just Manhattan residents or residents from the boroughs, but even beyond. So it's helping to build the Hudson River Park brand, and it's expanding the programming to other audiences. So we're looking at it as a learning experience this summer, and we're also looking at it as an opportunity when the busy season ends in usually October or November to hopefully be able to continue to engage patrons and new audiences throughout the slower months of the winter. So we look forward to hopefully 2021 getting back to whatever the new normal is going to be and bringing programs back to the park. But in the meantime, we're certainly enjoying engaging through the virtual or digital world. So we encourage everybody to please go to the website, look at the programming, tell your friends, log on to Facebook, log on to Instagram, and watch the programs.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions from folks on programming?
Jeffrey, it's Andrew. I don't have a question on programming, but to the extent, I think Kira mentioned budgets and impact to sponsors. I'm just curious, and we don't need to talk about it now, but it'd be helpful to understand what, if any, financial impact the trust is feeling as a result of the COVID situation. Again, doesn't need to be answered now,
Okay.
but
Jeffrey.
Maybe a follow-up.
Jeffrey?
Tom. Tom, yep, sorry.
Thank you very much for that list of programming. And when you send along the list of the programs, I'd love to see the list of the programs. Could you send links to them on either on the website or Facebook or wherever one can access and use them? And a question, how come it said 20,000 subscribers? I thought like 17 million people a year use the park. How come the digital numbers are so low? Is that just something that...
Oh, I should clarify. That's
okay.
that was just who receives our weekly emails. That's not the digital impressions. You are correct. The actual engagements are in the tens of millions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question?
Yes, can I just clarify, folks, if we can, absolutely to the question, if we can just get used to using the raise hand feature, which you can find by opening the participants tab, and at the bottom, or if you wave your mouse over your hand, over your name, it'll do raise hand. So Louis, that's all yours. Thank you for triggering me to put that reminder out there.
Thank you. When are you going to start thinking of actual programming for the end of the year?
I'll respond.
It's here again. We are hoping to continue some of our virtual programming that Tina and my staff will be curating or performing in quotations. So we'll be able to offer some programming internally. We hope through the fall. Public programs usually conclude their season around Labor Day. So we are already looking at our programming running through the end of October.
Okay.
And then just jumping in from the educational side, we have 2 public programs that are running through the end of October. Our Live from the Field, which is a weekly research segment that we do with science staff out conducting a monitoring project, and they talk about that to the public. And then secondly, our Ask a Scientist program is a monthly lecture series where we're inviting scientists to talk about current research and topics of interest. So this month we're talking about fish ecology. Later in the season, we're talking about sustainability and composting. And that's something that we could foresee expanding. And then of course in the fall, we'll also resume working with schools and students. So a lot of the programming we've been working on this past summer will adapt to the fall. So such as our virtual summer camp program will be retooled into an after-school program model. And then other programs we've run with direct summer camp and partner groups will be facilitated to schools, and depending how the fall season goes for schools and if students are able to take field trips, that'll determine whether we're able to work with some local groups that are walking distance from the park.
Right. And I think that with virtual, you have a fine opportunity maybe to do a little bit of both at the same time. I mean, I've been on programming out in Vancouver, in San Francisco, San Diego. It's really nice to be able to cut into groups that normally I can't see.
Yeah, I agree.
Mike,
it's a huge opportunity, Louis, because it widens your audience by a lot.
Michael?
I just wanted to say, have a big shout out to Tina and her team, because the pivot that they made is really difficult. And the resources on the website, I mean, you can send us the list, but the website is really usable. Everything is really clear, and it's actually part of the story to visit the website and just see how it's all laid out. I think it speaks to issues of accessibility and all the things I co-sign about reach. I just think it's wonderful. I hope a lot of it continues, but I definitely know what it took, because you know, that's my area, and I just want to make sure you get applauded for all of that great work. And I can't wait. There's some cool stuff coming up in August.
Thank you. Let's see, Noreen. Did you not put your hand up? Okay, I can lower it for you. You want to speak, but the problem is we still can't hear you.
Well, I believe if we can't hear Noreen, I'm happy to jump in, because I believe that the next update was about.
Nicolette, hold on 1 second. Tom, did you have a question on programming? Sorry, Nicolette.
No, just a suggestion, Tina. You may want to ask your visitors to your website what kind of scientists they'd like to speak to, because that even gives them more of a sense of engaging, and they may have questions you wouldn't even think of.
Absolutely, thank you. We're definitely planning a lot of in-season evaluation to get feedback from individuals and see what, you know, if these programs are maybe reaching a different audience, and what people want to see more of in the future. So thanks.
Great. I know Noreen was going to log out and come back in because she wasn't on mute, but we couldn't hear her. So
is this working?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. Yay! Very frustrating.
Noreen, I ran down the hallway to Edison and said, Edison, rescue her.
I don't know. To Andrew's point about budget, I mean, thank you everyone for your feedback, and thank you, Michael, for acknowledging the effort that this took. There are some really great projects, and it's terrific to hear some of the anecdotes about like what's coming up and Ask the Scientist, for example. It's really great. On a budget level, I was going to mention this earlier. I'm happy to get everyone kind of the numbers, but we're struggling, frankly. You know, when our preliminary budget was approved, or sorry, proposed, and then when we actually adopted our budget in time for our fiscal year in April, we slashed it significantly. Since then, we continue to kind of try to control expenditures because, you know, our tenants are struggling, which means our income is not what it normally is. So we were not able to hire all of the programming seasonals that we normally have, both in environment and education and in public programming. We were not able to hire the gardeners that we normally have. We were able to hire, I think, a total of 8 gardeners, thanks to a grant from Friends and some private contributions. There's 1 seasonal for the education department, environment, and that's it. So we normally have basically double our staff at this time of year, and we've lost that. And then there are other expenses related to COVID too. So in response to Andrew, that's the kind of brief life in a nutshell. And obviously we can talk more about capital construction impacts for the state and city later on as desired.
Thanks, Noreen. Andrew, did you have something to add on that?
A quasi-related, quasi-program related question, and then maybe later coming back to something Noreen mentioned, but from a programming perspective, have there been any discussions or consideration about use of park facilities when school reopens, meaning outside class instruction or anything along those lines?
Yeah, we have been informally asked about that from a few different people that are related to schools and sports and other things like that. obviously, Pier 40 is not really suitable for actual classroom kind of learning for the most part, but fields, potentially the Pier 84 classroom, you know, other ideas that people have about ways to engage or help kids be live and in person wherever possible is something that we would, you know, be happy to participate in conversations about.
I want to also add there's a nationwide working group that some colleagues in the Harbor educator community are very engaged in figuring out ways that schools can meaningfully use outdoor spaces. So we're going to learn more from this group as they're developing, but the idea is that they're trying to determine local spaces that can connect with schools and the way to kind of engage a full group of students by having half indoors, half outdoors. That's something as we learn more we'll share, but it seems like there are a lot of question marks in what the DOE will allow this fall.
It seems to me that the outdoor space, you know, the donut and the interior of Pier 40 would be an ideal space to have, you know, an outdoor, education center.
Yeah, we're
outdoor classes. It would be perfect.
It's obviously protected. We understand. You know, I think we have not been formally approached by anyone yet.
Tom, something new on programming?
Just a suggestion that I agree the interior of Pier 40 would be great. And, you know, is there anybody with a lot of tents, like large tents? So sides could be open, air can flow, ventilation can be free. You know, I think of the military. I think of the performance spaces that are not having performances anymore, that have, you know, portable Quonset huts and things like that. So if it ever does come about, I think you might find a partnership in people with some sort of infrastructure to help put make it a little more usable in the middle of Pier 40. And the Army can always use a good PR these days.
True. Thank you, Michael. And then I want to move on to our next topic.
It's because I'm new that I asked this question, but I feel like one of the priorities is making sure that the education team has what they need to continue doing this work and be responsive. And that is, and I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to support what I know is, I'm sure there's a development effort thinking about how to get some of that back. Is there anything that the advisory council can do to bolster that or support the effort to keep the education department strong in itself so that it can be responsive?
Thank you for that, Michael. I mean, we'll put some more thought into that, but one thing that does come to mind and that really does matter is helping get the word out, really all of you, that this park and the programs it offers is for everyone. You know, the more we can demonstrate that we are serving lots of people, not just 4 miles of Manhattan, that's a good thing for us. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, helping make sure that if there are ways to expand our audience so that sponsors and other people can kind of see the impact, or if you may have ideas once you look at the website and otherwise about how we can better promote ourselves, you know, we're all ears.
And hi, this is Carrie Roble. I also think Submerge, our Marine Science Festival, which is going to be at the end of September, is another great opportunity for us to consider how the Advisory Council could help to share not only information about the event, but to consider uniquely how groups can participate. So let's keep that also in thought, and we can respond with some more ideas.
Thank you all. How about on concessions?
Yes, that's me. Hi, I'm Rashi Puri. I'm the AVP of Real Estate Planning at Hudson River Park. I'll give you a quick update on all the food concessions that are open in the park. So the weather is great, a little bit too hot these days, but still people are out enjoying the park and outdoor dining. And that's something that they can do safely in these COVID times. So we now have all our food concessions open in some capacity with outdoor seating only. We've made sure that all health and safety protocols are being followed. These include maintaining a minimum of 6-foot distance between chairs at adjoining tables, limited takeout menu with outdoor seating only, adequate signage which encourages all the patrons to wear masks and keep 6-foot distance while standing in queues, touchless payments wherever possible, etc., etc. So we've tried to keep all our safety guidelines in place in all the concessions. I'll just quickly run through all the concessions one by one. Starting at the top at Pier 84, we have Hooked, which is started operating since a few weeks. Most of the people are familiar with Hooked. They've been operating since last summer. And they've presented to CB4 a few times. So it's very similar operation. It's a takeout with the option to sit outside. And they are basically, just kind of getting geared up. They just started a few weeks back. The next one at Pier 66 is Frying Pan. They are now in full operation. I mean, they are only outdoor seating, so they are operating as they normally do. They even have their waiting service now in place. So that is in full operation with, of course, the 6-foot distance between chairs being followed. Pier 45 Drift In is the most recent addition to the food concessions. They just opened last week actually. But right now they are open only for takeout. And then they're getting their seating area in place in the north and the south side. And in a week or two, they will have a seating option as well. They've presented to CB2 in April. So I know people are familiar with what they have to offer. Pier 26 City Vineyard has been operating for some time now. They have their rooftop seating open and they have expanded outdoor seating. And that's going well. At Pier 25, we have Grand Banks that's been operating since Memorial Day. They have seating in the vessel and some expanded seating along the railing. They're doing well. So that's really where we are with all the concessions, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ashley. Daniel?
I was just going to say I spoke to the proprietors at Drift In, just because they're a couple blocks from my house, and they did say they're going to be serving on Wednesday this week. So beginning Wednesday, they're going to be doing, their tables are going to be set up. That's what they told me. This is an update.
No, I think that's correct. So starting Wednesday, few tables on the north side, and then they'll move on to the south side as well. So in the next 2 weeks, they should be operating full on.
Great. Louis?
What time do your concessions open up? And the reason why I ask is that I've been over at the park almost every other morning. I get over around 7 a.m. before the sun comes up, and it's really great walking up where I go. So it'd be kind of nice to have some concessions at 7:30, etc. I see quite a few people walking along with me.
Right now they open around 11 a.m. and shut at around 8 p.m. or later. But I mean, I can definitely let them know, and if someone can open earlier, they would. But I mean, there are also going forward, if things open up, we would have options to have food carts opening as well. But right now that's not happening. But if that does happen, they could potentially open earlier in the morning.
Well, I'll just tell everybody that the park is great when it's cool.
I'm sure.
Thanks, Louis. Tom?
Yeah, question. I really am not aware of what concessions are in the park. You mentioned about 6 or 7 restaurants. Are there other concessions in the park? What do they consider Pier 57, and what's its current state of like opening and food and the public space and that kind of thing?
Noreen, do you want to take that? I'm not that.
There are a couple of other concessions. The bike rental place at Pier 84 is an example. Pier 57 we do not consider to be a concession. It's a lease. It's a long-term lease that went through a significant action process. So Chelsea Piers is not a concession. in our terminology, neither is Circle Line, etc.
Are we gonna,
sorry?
Are we gonna hear about their current condition as well?
Pier 57, you mean, or Chelsea Piers, or
Circle Line, Pier, how's the park, how are the people in the park doing? How's Intrepid doing? How's Circle Line doing? I heard their business is down like 85%.
Right, so that's
so things
that's
like
what
that.
I meant when Andrew mentioned, how's the budget? I said our tenants are not doing well. Most tenants, I mean, there are a few represented here, and they should speak for themselves, but most of our biggest tenants have not been able to open. Or are only minimally able to open, and that is a huge financial impact for them. It's a loss for the park financially, but also programmatically, everything that they offer. Erica, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I saw you here.
That's the problem with having video, huh? Not being a bunch of digits. I mean, clearly we are a health club as one of our businesses, which Cuomo has completely just eliminated out of all phases. So I don't know when that's coming back. We have a lot of youth programming that was very busy, and clearly the closeness, and children are not known for their hand washing and hygiene skills. So that obviously is problematic. Golf, curiously, was designed with social distancing in mind. We didn't really realize it 20 years ago, but we have one stairway up, one stairway down, open air. They're dividers 10 feet apart. They're automatic ball tee up. We actually wash the balls in between every time we collect them. So we actually, that facility was designed for COVID. We didn't really realize until we had to look at it. But all of the facilities are largely, we are hoping camp stays on the docket, on the governor's docket for the end of July. But I mean, you know what's happened to youth programming and health clubs. It's been widely reported. So we're shut, and we have 2 huge event spaces, and that's out.
Oh yeah.
So,
Noreen, is Hornblower still a tenant in the park?
Yes, they are. So, I mean, generally with every one of the tenants, whether small or large, they're subject to what the governor allows. They're subject to what they think they can do safely themselves in terms of operating. They're subject to whether they think they can make money, whether it's small or large, with respect to whatever their business or the nature of their business is. And so there's like a one-on-one discussion with each and every one of them, whether it's mini golf to, the non-motorized boat houses to the Chelsea Piers and Circle Lines of the world. So yes.
It's a tough road to hoe.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, we hired early on in February, we enlisted the medical doctor who's got a background. I can't remember his resume, but it was some CDC type person who's retired, because we, obviously watched the news, saw the reports, and we're very concerned about particularly the kids. Health club members, contrary to what the governor will say, are very used to cleaning. They grab something, they wipe it down. You walk into a class, you wipe stuff down. You get off the treadmill, you wipe it down. And they're adults. So I know that the health clubs have gotten a lot of the beef on this, but so we actually closed early. We closed a week before the governor had people close, because we thought it was socially responsible, and we perhaps could push the envelope and try to open some stuff and push, but I don't know that anybody really wins, including every single person on this call who would interact with our customers. So we obviously want to open, and we're going to do our best to get open as quick as possible, but not forfeiting safety. We decided early on to be socially responsible and take the hit, and we have a week on everybody on losing money. So
thank you for sharing that. Andrew is asking if HRPT is positioned to help tenants with any SBA relief program, or if there's been any questions or any assistance in that regard. A question in the chat.
I'm not the person to answer that. I can take that back to our office and ask, unless Rashi, you happen to know anything about that.
No, I haven't heard of that. I'll check on
So
it.
I honestly, I'm sorry, I don't know, but I can follow that up and let you all know.
Okay. Mary?
There we go. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. I had a question about the concessions, following up on what Rashi said, partly because I've seen quite a few young people on Pier 25 drinking out of cans, something alcoholic. I was wondering how many problems you've had with either from tenant concessions or concessions just outside the park with people coming in, drinking, if there's been bad behavior because of the drinking, or a lot of added trash because of food that people are eating, wherever they might perch.
Could I suggest that might be a good transition to the next agenda topic, which is—
That's a great idea, Noreen.
Thinking of pleasing you there, Jeffrey. But I think we've got, I believe, Dennis McCartney and Deb Kuska both on the phone, who I think can speak knowledgeably to both trash and safety.
Hi, everyone. It's Dennis McCartney. Hope everyone's enjoying their evening. It's still quite warm out. I'll just give you a quick overview, and then I'll answer your question. So now in our ever-changing COVID world, PEP isn't just patrolling and enforcing laws in the park. They're now also tasked with helping educate the public about social distancing and wearing masks. In fact, they've been actually handing out masks throughout the park. Just this weekend alone, they handed over 2,500 masks out to park goers. They've been visiting all different sections of the park, especially the busier locations, such as like the playground at 25, Pier 45, Pier 84. There's quite a few locations. They've been hitting up the skate parks to try to make sure that people are in compliance, and just to educate them about wearing a mask for not only their safety, but for everyone else's. Pier 84 and Pier 45, the lawns. A couple of weeks back, we put in social distancing circles, which has been a great help with helping to maintain. I'm sorry. Just to help maintain social distancing amongst the people who are just trying to get some sun and some relaxation. So that has been since the beginning, when we had some issues in the park with people not really social distancing. So that's always been a good thing. As far as the alcohol in the park, in the beginning of the, I guess when the weather's changed over to be a little nicer, we did see a huge uptick in alcohol being consumed inside the park. Basically what we did was we ended up having PEP go out, and they started to do more enforcement, and it seemed to quell some of the issues. Week after week, we're still seeing some alcohol in the park. They do issue summonses to people who fail to comply. We really haven't had, since we've had the concessions put up the signs that alcohol is not allowed in the park, it seems like that's helped a lot. And it seems like they've gotten, in the beginning, they may have been lacking a little bit of helping with, getting the message out. But then they've really, come and forth. And now with the tables that are available for drink, for people to consume their alcohol and have a meal, I think it has helped greatly. And, we're not seeing as bad of an issue. There's still some, but it's not as bad. And PEP's been doing a great job at this point. They've been tasked with just a lot of different, new job functions that, I think everyone's just becoming accustomed to nowadays, especially with social distancing. So that's where we're at with PEP. Maybe Deb could speak to the if there's issues with the trash. As far as problematic behavior, at this point, we really haven't had too much, and most people are in compliance once they're informed that alcohol is not allowed to be consumed within the park, except for designated areas.
Sorry, Deb, go ahead.
No, hi. I just wanted to say hello to everybody. Deb Kuska. Just to follow up on what Dennis was talking about, we did provide sign stanchions for PEP to use that speak to no alcohol. So the signs can be deployed where there's a perceived problem or an actual problem to help get ahead of the curve on that particular issue. But as far as trash goes, we really haven't seen an uptick in, general litter scattered around. Folks are using the receptacles. And on that topic, we've really started to collect trash data. So I'm very interested to see as the months have turned over from really quiet to slow start in activity, what those numbers are in those trash cans. And we are working closely with property management to strike the balance in what they're responsible for and what folks are carrying out and is considered just general park trash.
Thank you both. Daniel?
Yeah, well, number one, I do want to say that I think PEP has done a great job, and especially with handing out the masks and also with soft enforcement on the alcohol. I mean, you had a tricky situation down at City Vineyard where they're serving beers in cups and people are taking 3 or 4 steps away from Pier 26. And, then the PEP officers are waiting for you to open up your can of beer and they're telling you can't drink. Now that isn't so much of an issue anymore that it was a month ago because now there's a place for you to drink. But it really was a tricky situation. It didn't make a lot of sense that you're allowing the sale of alcohol, but you couldn't drink it. Whereas and as the PEP officer said, and this was for everybody's knowledge, is, well, if we don't see you pouring it, we don't know if it's beer or alcohol. So the people that were drinking wine weren't cited, but the folks that they could actually see pouring in the beer, those were the ones that were being questioned by PEP. But they were very cool. They did not give us a ticket. They just told us about the rules. So I think it's important in the future just to be sensitive to, if you're going to sell alcohol and you have no place to sit, then maybe it's not a great place to sell alcohol if it's illegal. So just my point from being someone who actually was told not to do it anymore. And I'm like, okay, no problem. And then, there's might not be a lot of trash in the park, but there seems to be a tremendous amount of trash in the water. Now I know that's not really a trust. It's probably coming from upriver, but so who's someone who does go in the river, I felt like there's a lot dirtier this year than it has been in the past. And I don't know, I know there's might be a clean water group, a committee that's being formed, but it is something that's concerning. And I just want to raise that as well.
Thanks, Daniel. Richard?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to ask about the masks and mask enforcement. This is, of course, a very sensitive topic, not only here, but across the country. But I'm in the park fairly frequently, and I would say mask compliance is perhaps 75 or 80%, but there's a persistent group, particularly runners and skateboarders that don't comply. And I've never seen anyone approached in any way, shape, or form. So what are you trying to do with mask compliance, and what's been the experience?
So as far as masks go, we've been, like I said, we've been educating people on it. We've had the PEP officer who's assigned to the Pier 40 booth. He has a full stack of masks in there that they've been handing out. A lot of times, unfortunately, some of the runners, like you said, there's going to be a group of people who are never going to want to comply. And, I've noticed that a lot of runners now are running without the masks. And what they do is they'll put it on as they're passing people. But PEP does have supplies of masks in their vehicles. As they see people, they try to hand them out. And, I think it's very important to get the people the mask. But, as far as, the way the law is written, it's kind of, only if you're getting within 6 feet of people. So, as the runners are passing, sometimes they don't feel like they're 6 feet near anyone. And it's not always the case. But they do try to get the compliance from them.
We're about to be refreshing all of the signage that we put out in the park. Those of you who are in it may have noticed that it's kind of faded. In some cases, it's not as effective as I think as it could be. We're taking a suggestion kind of from Katie Bordenaro the last time about messaging that emphasizes protect yourself and other people, wear the mask. But it's as Jenna said, the combination of the way the executive order is phrased, limitations on PEP, and frankly, the number of people that are not wearing masks makes it kind of a selective enforcement situation if you were to go up, even if PEP were allowed to, and say, try to ticket people for not wearing it. It's a challenge. So it's really, our approach is education. And then sometimes in a place like a dog run, I think, Dennis, you'll, where we say you have to have a mask to use this facility, you'll sometimes have people leave and then kind of let them come back in. Am I correct in that?
Usually what happens is PEP's been actually getting a lot of compliance. So a lot of times, the person in the dog run may not be wearing a mask, but once PEP enters, they end up putting it on immediately. They know the drill. And anyone who doesn't have a mask, because PEP does have available, they have them available when they walk in, they've been being issued a mask. So we've been getting compliance through issuing them the masks. So, again, it's not always seen, but once PEP goes in there, they get 100% compliance. They really haven't had to shut down the park recently and have everyone removed, and then people can come back. So that's a good thing.
I would just make one last thing. I think you're right, Noreen, about the signage. That's going to be very important. The signage regarding masks is pretty limited and weak from my recollection of being in the park pretty frequently, and maybe some kind of strong community-oriented appeal to people's conscience might improve the situation some.
Thank you for that. And thank you to Dennis and Deb for that update on the whole. I'm also glad to hear about updated signage, not just because it's faded, but the messaging, the continued change of message is important right now. Any other questions on public safety for Dennis or Deb? Thanks, everybody. Moving on to see an update on the river project and estuarium. I'm not sure if many of you had a chance to read through the report that we received earlier today as well, but I want to pass that over. Who's giving that report today? Go ahead, Nicolette.
I'll happily start off and then transition to some of the other team members that are here on the call. So hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Nicolette Witcher, and I think most of you know who I am by now. I am excited, actually, to be able to give you an update on some of these things, because they're the fun, passionate, exciting things, at least my opinion, right? Like, but first, one of the things what we want to cover today, and I did outline it in the email earlier this afternoon, was just an update on the ESMP. So that's short for Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan. Please say that 3 times fast now, all of you. No, kidding. Okay. And then also just give you a highlight on some of the projects that we're doing. Some really exciting work like the Tribeca Enhancement Project. I know you wanted to hear a little bit about that. And then the estuarium, the almighty estuarium. We're finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, and it's really exciting. So, but first, I did see or hear something just about wanting to get a little clarity or just an update on the growth of the Trust's environmental team, in transition of some of the staff. So, the really exciting thing that we've been doing, thank you, Richard, thank you, Kathy. This has been so amazingly, it's been such a great work in progress over the last year, is a merger between the River Project and the Hudson River Parks Education and Environmental Research Science team. So we have really come full circle, and I think we have a really great merged team, philosophy, function, process. I'd like to say it's gone better than I could have dreamed of. We have some great River Project staff that has transitioned to make our staff more robust. We now have 9 team members working full-time on environment and education and research initiatives in the park, and that's actually one of the larger departments if you compare it with some of the other ones. So not everyone's full-time right now. And then, we got some really great technical expertise there too, like Siddhartha Hayes, who joined, who's really been leading up recently, now that Nina's gone, the Aquaria and the field science component. So he's now been a part of our team and really helping to grow that initiative. So I'd like to say it's really leveraged each organization's strengths and has worked to build something that I think we're all proud of, and hopefully we're coming to the tail end of that transitionary period. And then the other transition is some staffing changes, right? I heard a couple of, I think it's fairly clear. I was the head of the department for many years, and I have decided to take a little bit of a step back and transition into the role of senior policy advisor. So I'm still here, but for personal reasons, I needed to just transition a little bit. But I'm actually really happy to say it's kind of the best of both worlds once again, because I'm not just walking away. I've worked really hard and poured my heart and soul along with others at the trust to hopefully build something meaningful and respected by the community in terms of all these great programs and initiatives. And I'm staying on part-time. And Carrie Roble, who was the Trust Science Director for a number of years and really spearheaded some of the kind of emerging science and research projects, is taking on the role of department head for the department. And then alongside with Tina Walsh, who is now transitioning to a senior director role. As so many have mentioned, even just today, we've really grown the environmental programming, outreach, education initiatives so much that that's really taken on a life of its own. So I'm still around. You'll still be hearing from me. I still have a voice, hopefully, if Carrie and Tina will let me. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're a great team, but there is some transition. And if anyone else has any questions about that, I'm gladly take them, but also happy to just move on to some of the substantive stuff here. So the Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan. Oh, well, the one thing I just want to mention is, we did have an update. I came to the Advisory Council in November of last year, November 2019, and did touch on a couple of these things, and happy to kind of jump in and give an update here today as well. But, I'm also just kind of wanting to put it out there that I think it's very timely that, we're happy to come on a more regular basis too. Once upon a time, not that long ago, a lot of what we were doing really focused on programming, on outreach, on enrichment. And so that was really folded into a lot of the programming updates we gave the Advisory Council over the years. So now that we're really jumping into this next phase, it's I think timely, and we're happy to really come on a more regular basis to give, targeted updates on specific projects or whatever it is that the Advisory Council is interested in. So just kind of want to make sure that's out there. And I think it makes a lot of sense, because now we're really jumping into some interesting and some pretty, bigger projects, especially with restoration. So I'll jump into a little update on where we're at with the Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan, the process of that. And then I'll transition and I'll let Carrie and Tina, or we'll kind of tag team a little bit on talking about the Tribeca enhancement in particular. And then one of us, I think Carrie, maybe will jump in and give an update on where we're at with some, just advancing some technical information about the estuarium. So in terms of the sanctuary management plan, you know, as we mentioned in November, we had been working on on creating the action agenda itself, which is really the substance of the document. We then met with the full technical advisory committee. So if you don't know what the technical advisory committee is, as part of this, well, the sanctuary management plan, just gonna take a quick step back here, is really the guiding document to managing the Hudson River Park's estuarine sanctuary, so the protection and preservation of the sanctuary waters, but in a way that fosters compatible recreational uses, right? So that's where a park, we're trying to create the access, we're trying to, you know, create the enjoyment, the connection, the in-water recreation. There are commercial uses in the park, they are there, and then balance that with this preserving, restoring, raising awareness, and creating this context of being in the sanctuary. So this is a management document that's going to really help do that and give us that, you know, the action agenda is really supposed to give us the kind of the framework, the skeleton for, you know, what we've done and where we're going. You know, we met with the full TAC December of 2019 and showed them, so in the year past, we had really ironed out with specific, you know, subcommittees in terms of education, what target priorities we should have for the coming decade, et cetera. And then by December of 2019, we had the framework for the full action agenda in place, and we reviewed it with the TAC as a whole. And we received you know, some targeted feedback through January, but in general, I think we've ironed out a substantial draft, final draft, not, you know, I'm not saying final, but it's a, you know, a draft where it represents actions, objectives for moving forward in the areas of education. So environmental education, that's raising awareness, fostering stewardship, public access. We have to build the park. We have to create visual, physical access, and habitat enhancement and research. So, you know, just a couple of key takeaways with those things. The biggest bullet points in education were kind of continuing doing what we're doing. We got a lot of feedback that, you know, we're doing a good job and we could do more of it, and that should be memorialized in the action agenda. But continue the EJ, the environmental justice, the diversity and inclusion programs and policies that we've already started to set in place. I may not have mentioned, but Carrie's background in environmental justice as well as being a marine biologist. And so she really came on to the team with the lens of we have to make sure we provide access for all. And that's just been really valuable. And of course, something that our entire team has fully embraced in years past, but going forward, it's just something we have to make sure we continue to do and prioritize, maybe, you know, continue to prioritize. And just some of the other, well, maybe I'll leave education there because I'm happy to answer targeted questions about any of the other things, but, you know, plastic pollution, climate change, how do we focus on those things even more than we're doing now, are some of the big takeaways, more metrics, et cetera. The next area was the one that we had to grow the most in, the research and habitat enhancement. And that's actually what, you know, took a really long time to iron out. We had some amazing experts in the room through our technical advisory committee. And there was just that's the area where we knew we were going to do the most amount of growth over the next decade. We need a lot of baseline data of the sanctuary. We had some, but not nearly enough. And we needed to figure out how to do it in a way that was meaningful really, so we did that with the TAC. We identified all the actions and then like projects through working with the TAC, projects that would help to achieve some of those actions.
Sorry, I just want to, you sent a great email today. And if folks haven't had a chance to read that, I strongly encourage you to do so. I want to pause for a moment and see if there's any specific questions on what you've run through so far, or if, as you pointed out, there's anything specific on education. Mary?
I was just wondering, we've been hearing fantastic things about the environmental education. Are there any educational initiatives in the area of history or the arts? Because at one time there were some history walking tours, boat tours, talking about the history of the area. And are you maintaining any of that?
I'll let, Tina can expand on this. We've tried, and so yes, it's something we absolutely want to do more of. Sometimes we find the right historian that's really invested, and for a couple of years have had great relationships with someone that gets really engaged in giving history tours. We had someone in particular that was, doing a great job in connecting it to historic vessels. Then we lost that connection and we tried to find others. So always looking to do more of it. It's an important part of the waterfront to make sure that history is memorialized. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, Tina.
Yeah, I'll just add in that one of our school programs is focused on the history of the New York City waterfront, including a tour of the frying pan. So that's one program that is not one of our most popular, but we do, I'd say at least 10% of our education programs are focused on that each year. And then we do have plans to do a walking tour of the Greenwich Village history as part of our Hudson River Walk virtual series, probably later in the season, potentially at one of our October walks. But definitely, we're always looking also for recommendations of historians. Like Nicolette mentioned, we're kind of between historians right now. So if you have anybody you'd like to recommend, I'm always open to that too.
At the Village Community Boathouse, we're like very much aware of the history of the harbor, and our fleet of boats, are reproductions of Whitehall gigs that were used in the harbor during the 18th and 19th century. And, we talk about that to, all of the people who come to row with us. And, it's sort of, part of our story. And, and it's also, very obvious. Our awareness of the history and the importance of it is, manifested in our boats.
Absolutely, and we've really appreciated that VCB has brought the Wooden Boats to Submerge, our Marine Science Festival, in years past. And this upcoming year, the festival, as Carrie mentioned, is going to be digital, but we're thinking of ways to really highlight all the vessels and on-water programming and opportunities in the park. So I think there's a really fun way for us to highlight Lilac and VCB and the Downtown Boathouse and all these groups that have such dynamic programming.
I want to jump in too quickly and give a quick shout out to a recent Facebook Live program that I encourage everybody to look at. Tina and her crew did a spectacular job at a program that features the frying pan. And you ought to take a look at that go to the website and look at Facebook Live and take a look at that tour, that virtual tour of the frying pan. It is really terrific.
Thanks, Tom. Tom Fox.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I would encourage the Trust to use its brand marketing to promote current programs within the park that focus on history. Like any activities that are happening within the park that focus on history. The other thing is you're doing in Tribeca, I used to do environmental education back in the Middle Ages when you did it on horseback. The important thing is to get projects that are popular, like Deb, you just mentioned the oyster restoration project. Well, the West Side was lined with oyster houses, cheek to jowl, and it was the working man's lunch. You know, a dozen oysters, which were, you know, 8 inches long, and a quart of beer. That was a working man's lunch on the waterfront. There's a dude who wrote a book about oyster houses, whose name's escaping me right now, but he lives in New York. And, you know, it'd be interesting to pair your restoration project of oysters with a historic project regarding oysters. Like the Vanderbilts made a fortune on oysters from Staten Island coming to New York, and they used to sail across. They had a ferry that went back and forth from Staten Island, and they sold their special Staten Island oysters over here. Hard to believe, but Kurlowski or I'll think of the name of the fellow, but it might be a nice.
Kurlansky.
Yeah. I had dinner with him once. It might be a nice combination of restoration and historic education, and maritime history.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, that's an excellent book. A lot of our team has read that and really takes inspiration from it when we're talking about oysters. We agree it's really impactful to pair the history of oysters with the restoration. And one of our programs later this month, Celebrate Oysters. We love puns. That's one of our best ones, I will say. We do start with a talk about both the economic and historical importance of oysters, in addition to their ecological importance. And then we focus on how to monitor them, how to measure and tell if they're alive or dead, and then a special feature on the Tribeca Oyster Project too. So that's one of the monthly programs we'll be running, and we're happy to share information.
Hopefully we'll figure it out.
That's great, and how important they are in the history of the city.
Why do you have a mask on?
Absolutely.
Drink some water.
Rob.
Hi, thanks, Jeff. It's Rob Perrone from Hudson River Foundation. So number one, let me just thank Nicolette and Tina and Carrie for all their hard work. They really do a great job, and really, are kind of stellar among the entire New York, New Jersey harbor and off the Hudson in terms of the effort they put out on education, and now on starting on restoration. So having said that, of course, what we have, we always want more. So I think the $1.5 million project that, Tina did a great job of describing in the email, I think, of course, is a pilot, right, for really thinking about the entire, the restoration of the entire estuarine sanctuary. And I just want to highlight, obviously we're heading into a tough budget year, if not years. But there is a little bit of hope on the horizon in a couple of ways. One is the governor's proposed Environmental Bond Act, and I would certainly encourage the trust to, understanding the kind of the reasons for the delay, but getting the sanctuary management plan out and approved in advance of that Bond Act and the plans to be made for spending that Bond Act money, assuming it passes in November, would be a critical opportunity for advancing this work going forward. And something that I think the entire advisory council and obviously the elected officials, should be mindful of. And, I think the second is, I don't know who the gentleman was who mentioned the sort of deterioration of water quality and floatables in the water, and obviously an issue up and down the Hudson, certainly not helped by the, rain events we've had recently. But the city is, advancing its long-term control plan, and that's been delayed as well. But certainly there is still an opportunity to let the city DEP know about the impacts of those floatables on businesses in Hudson River Park, and I would encourage folks to do so.
Rob, if I may, the first part on the funding factor, is that something you would suggest we as the advisory council advocate for the trust and the project?
Sure. I mean, I think, and obviously I think there's, when the environmental sanctuary management plan is finalized, my assumption is that it will come with it some sort of capital funding request, or, and the trust may not know where the money is going to come from, but just like the upland projects that are in the finance plan, the SMP, I assume, will have some sort of capital budget request behind it. One potential source would be the Bond Act. I think, having the advisory council align, communicate with the advocates that are kind of pushing the Bond Act, and I can certainly forward those contact information to you, Jeff. Would be great. I'm sure they'd appreciate a message.
Yeah, I think that might be something, if it's going to be good for the park, for us to have a letter around seeking support or encouraging that it be directed our way.
Yeah, so if you want, I can draft, just as an action item, if you're interested, I could draft a letter and send it to you to circulate.
I love it.
That is helpful.
Yeah, it's my second meeting, but I think you guys know I like actions. I like letters. I like things like that. I think it's good for us. So that'd be fantastic, Rob, if you could do that.
Yep, will do.
Noreen, did your hand go up in response to anything Rob said? Just to give you the second there.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Rob. That's very helpful. We actually obviously are in touch with the governor's office and some, of the DEC folks about the various environmental initiatives that are in the draft or the preliminary draft ESMP, and the estuarium is a good example, but there are other things as well that would be eligible. I think some people know this, but the way funding works for us is it doesn't come all at once. And certain things are capitally eligible and certain things are not. Research generally is not. So the Bond Act is a really great opportunity for us. We certainly are tracking it very carefully. And so we can talk more about the initiatives as desired. I think Jeffrey will let you decide how you want to spend the rest of the time here, but we can talk more about the specific Tribeca habitat enhancement. I do think that people seem to want an update on the estuarium, so I don't want to let that go, but I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, I see two other hands up, and I'm wondering, in the interest of time, because we not only have a construction update from the trust, we have the Friends, we have 2 committee updates, and likewise a number of new and old business items that I imagine folks are going to want to talk about. So I would prefer that we go right into a direct update on the estuarium, unless people insist on questions about what we have on the table right now. Tom, is that okay, or do you want to? Okay, thank you. On the estuarium.
Great. Sure. So hi everyone. Oh, excuse me. Hi everyone, I'm Carrie Roble, and happy to provide a bit of an update and progress on the estuarium in our work with Cambridge 7. So as I believe everyone knows, estuarium is a public education and science facility connecting the general public to research, also educators, and all surrounding our Hudson River Sanctuary. So the intent is to increase public understanding, awareness, and stewardship of the Hudson River estuary, as well as to highlight how our behaviors influence water quality. And over the last number of weeks, we've been working with Cambridge 7 to lead a technical and conceptual survey to optimize the space within the estuarium for science and education. And as Nicolette mentioned in her email, Cambridge 7 has extensive experience in aquarium and related exhibitry. And they've also had a history of working with the River Project. So with River Project staff, we've been discussing aquaria systems. We've been considering space utilization, exhibits, and sanctuary stories to best tell the sanctuary science and wildlife stories. Much of the discussion has been focused on technical aspects and focused on tanks and life support systems. So we've been exploring opportunities and limitations of different tank systems, including flow-through tanks, closed tank systems, hybrid systems, and also fish and wildlife that are intrinsic to telling a comprehensive story of the Hudson River. And Andy Aiken, he's an aquarium expert, has been joining a lot of those conversations. We're very indebted to the participation of River Project past staff who have obviously been working with a flow-through system and local wildlife for a number of years. That is an update, and we're happy to answer any questions regarding some of these discussions in our work with Cambridge 7.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Carrie. That was a really good overview. Hi, everyone. My name is Siddhartha. I am currently the Research and Aquaria Coordinator at Hudson River Park. I was former River Project staff for a number of years. And we're, both myself and my colleague Toland Kister, also of the River Project, now part of Hudson River Park. We are really excited the way things are going. The Cambridge 7 and the whole team has been very responsive, very creative, and very thoughtful in sort of trying to merge and blend the River Project Wet Lab. What is good about the River Project Wet Lab, our current flow-through system that's been at Pier 40 for the past almost decade, a little shorter, and Hudson River Park. So we're really excited where everything's going with the tank designs, the species, the stories, like Carrie was saying. And yeah, we'd be happy to answer questions and how it's going.
But I also
Thank you
just
both
want to
for that.
clarify that what we're doing right now is really kind of the step one. So this isn't, we're not designing the building right now. Like what we're doing is really getting down to the technical necessities for doing a unique aquaria to some flow through. What do we need? How do we do it? What kind of fish can we keep alive? How do we can we keep some of them longer? Do we put them so we want to point out we're at that like high level kind of just technical and concept phase right now, and happy to share some takeaways, but we're smack in the middle of that kind of technical process of so.
Thank you. Alice? Andrew has a question in the chat. Any sense of timing on when you'll move into the design phase? Or perhaps could you sort of give us what the phases are if you're sort of in, I don't know, your past scope, would you say, and now you're getting into what step are you in?
So I'll start with that. We know how to build a small building in Hudson River Park. We know how to build a bathroom. We know how to build some might argue, but a boathouse. We did not know anything about how much space was necessary in a building, even for life support systems, mechanicals, tanks, all of those kinds of things that when we met with our sanctuary committee of our board last year, and I think Rob Perani was part of that, maybe Clay Hiles from Hudson River Foundation. One of the takeaways was that we needed to learn more to inform us so that we could have a better sense of a cost estimate and basically a better sense of what it took to build this building. So we know where the building will be. It's on the upland area in Tribeca. It cannot block a view corridor. So there is a very specific place between Pier 25 and Pier 26 where the building can be. And the basic, programmatic elements of it are live fish, education, and kind of a place for science. And then there's things that have come out of this discussion, like, you need a place maybe to prepare the fish, the food for the fish. Gee, that might smell. Maybe that needs to be someplace different from, where the general public walks in. So these are the kinds of things that we've been talking through with Cambridge 7 and the River Project team with the experience in this. From this, we will get a concept report, and that will help us have a better sense of the kind of sizing and the truing up of our preliminary assumptions about the program and what we would normally do for cost estimating a building. We have about $15 million thus far reserved for the estuarium. That is not enough. As I just mentioned, we're hoping that maybe the Bond Act is a source for this. We had $10 million of public money. Madeline and company were successful in raising about another $5 million of private money. But it's been a hard exercise. Hopefully this will help make this more tangible for us. So the next step really would be, you know, having a better sense of money, taking a look at whether the Bond Act or something else can come through as a source for that. Maybe we decide to start planning, you know, a design. Maybe we don't. I don't know. That would be something that we would be discussing with our board.
Okay, thanks for that, Noreen. So you don't really have a full sense of, you know where it can go, but you don't know how big it's going to be either in terms of footprint, square footage?
We do, actually. There is a maximum square footage basically that it can be because it can't block the visual corridor. So, so there's a very specific, it's like a square. It's like a perfect square almost between 25 and 26. We've shown the placeholder for the spot before. We can circulate that to all of you so that you all have a visual for that.
That would be great. Thank you. Alice?
Yeah, hi, Alice Blank, Vice Chair CB1. I just wanted to thank everyone and encourage the Trust to come back to the board in September and provide this sort of update. I think a lot of people in the community are really eager to know what's going on. It's the first I've heard of the Tribeca enhancement materials, in fact, and I am the chair of the Environmental Protection Committee. So I think it's due time to have the community engaged on these terrific sounding projects. So I just wanted to ask that happens in September if possible. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be
okay.
Sure.
Any other questions on the estuarium? Lucy just posted something from New Yorkers for Parks in the chat about a petition if folks want to sign on to it regarding the Bond Act that we're talking about for individuals to sign on to that. Any other questions on this matter? Okay, thank you all for those updates. With Richard? Not yet. You're still muted. There you go.
Quick question on the estuary and sanctuary management plan as to when you see that going out, when you see that being released, or for internal or external comments?
As soon as possible. We're trying. You know, COVID did derail our timeline. We had really hoped to have it go through. We wanted to go through a public review process. And so we had originally had a goal of spring, and it just got derailed like so many other things. So we're working hard on, honestly, it's not so much the action agenda at this point, because we really feel like most of that is ironed out. It's all the other stuff that goes with it. So, you know, the graphics and the maps and the progress report that is supplementing that. So all of the context material, and formatting that and packaging. We're in the packaging phase right now, and we're well underway. And so our goal is that the public review process will happen this fall, and we really are going to push for that.
Thank you. Tom, on this subject?
Yeah, just I agree. This is a wonderful opportunity to educate people, and the public review process should be, you should wait till you can actually engage the public, because it's something that gives them an opportunity to feel closer to the park and the issue.
Okay.
Okay. One of my favorite items, construction updates, because that makes us look towards progress and finishing this park at some point too. Noreen, who's giving that one? Is that your honor tonight?
Yeah. So the best news is that we are still going to be opening Pier 26 this fall as a new public space. The COVID supply chain has affected a few of the suppliers, but the team has been making really good progress on construction. I've been out touring it a few times in recent weeks. We had hoped to be able to get you out. Tom had asked for that the last time. COVID is making that more challenging than it once would have been. We had talked about doing a big group visit, and I don't think that's going to be feasible. But Pier 26 is moving along. We are Also, the Whitney, which is doing the construction directly for the Days End sculpture on the south side of Gansevoort, is making good progress on that, and that also is supposed to be done and done this fall. We are, let's see, we are working on construction documents for the Gansevoort project, Gansevoort Peninsula. We are readying the permit materials because that has the salt marsh and other things that touch the water that actually needs regulatory permits. We'll also be tracking what happens with city funding. Basically, city construction funding is more or less on hold and has been since April. However, thanks to litigation from the earlier generation of Hudson River Park Friends, we do have a substantial amount of money that we can use to at least start that project. And we expect to do that still in 2021. Pier 50, I should say Little Island, is progressing really well. It's dramatic. If you go past there, you can see trees and green things right now, and it's a really wonderful thing. Pier 97, I think at the last advisory council meeting, we had just been to CB4 to talk about the design update. We have been back since then, I believe, on the comfort station designs. We're going to be tweaking the design of the comfort station to address some CB4 comments, but generally, Jeffrey can confirm, but I think things were pretty well received. We were at CB4 a couple of weeks ago with the plans for the redo of Chelsea Waterside Park. We're expanding the jog run significantly there. We are going to be having a permanent picnic area, which is something the community wanted. The long desired comfort station that will be an amenity not just for Chelsea Waterside Park East, but for the Chelsea Cove area on the west, will be part of that. And thanks to Speaker Corey Johnson, and to Borough President Brewer, we got money also in this year's budget. Hopefully we'll be able to use it sooner rather than later for redoing the ball field at Chelsea Waterside. The ball field is, like all the ball fields, they get old, they get a lot of use, and they need to be redone periodically. So Chelsea Waterside is a great project. At Pier 40, the fields reopened today. The brand new fields do not have the full number of people on them that they should have on them, but I actually saw 3 hot people playing soccer on it just before this meeting when I came out, so that is actually really terrific. You'll remember that we redid the entire courtyard fields, and just as we were about to reopen them, COVID had us close them. But that's exciting. We are also still doing pile repairs. We are going to be bringing a contract to our board this week for facade repairs on the portions of the Pier 40 facade. And I think since the last board meeting, our board approved a contract for $12.8 million for yet another section of the Pier 40 roof that needs to be redone. And we're using air rights money from the St. John's air rights transaction for all of this infrastructure work at Pier 40. This fall, we expect to be starting a significant action process for the Intrepid lease. So that's something that we will get on your radar once we are ready to do that. Obviously, CB4 is as well. Corey Johnson, in addition to the money for the Chelsea Waterside ball field and for lots of Pier 40 ball field and other things, put money back into the budget for Chelsea Waterside, for the Pier 84 dog run, which is in need of redoing, and also for the tennis courts just south of Houston Street. Again, we'll be hoping to advance all of those projects. We'll be initiating what's called the CP process to try to draw down money from the city for those projects shortly. And, it's a matter of whether OMB, the city's Office of Management and Budget, will allow the money to be released for city money. I did that quickly because I know we're running late, but I'm happy to answer questions.
It's okay, Noreen. The one thing I'd ask you to elaborate on, just because I got quite a few notes about it, is on Pier 97, which I can't, personally wait until it's done, as you know. Can you explain to the council regarding the historic ship and the relocation that you provided information to Community Board 4 about when that presentation came through. But if you could share that with the council, that would be helpful.
Sure. Rashi is actually managing the RFP process for Pier 97 and the other historic vessels, which is still open. So we can't fully answer certain questions, but generally the Pier 97 is, its northern neighbor is the Con Edison Fuel Transfer Facility. It's a water dependent use that's allowed in the Hudson River Park Act, and it delivers fuel to Pier 98. It's a fairly narrow area, and Pier 97 was intentionally rebuilt when it was rebuilt some years ago with a rounded corner and with a buffer set of piles off of the pier end, because in the past, the edge of the pier was hit by barges and by Con Ed trying to bring, or by Con Ed's contractors trying to bring their barges into Pier 98. So while we kind of initially thought that the historic vessel might be best suited on the northern side of Pier 97, upon reflection, you can see the rounded edge there. Rashi, is that you? Thank you very much. You can see that the edge, unlike all the rest of the piers that we've ever built, is rounded there, and then there are these protective piles off of its edge, and that's specifically for the navigation functions related to the barge. Sometimes there's more than one barge there. There are tugboats coming in there, and we determined that the northern edge was not the suitable edge for the historic vessel. And Rashi, I'm going to let you kind of give the update on the historic vessel process.
Sure. Sorry, one second. Yeah, so Noreen explained it very well about Pier 97, but in terms of the entire RFEI process, as I've already updated the community boards on separate occasions, we have the RFEI for Piers 25, 26, and 97. So for Pier 25, the RFEI process is closed because we've already made the selection, and I had updated CB1, I believe in February this year. So the two berths have been awarded to Lilac and Fireboat McKean. So Pier 25 is closed. Regarding Pier 26 and 97, the RFEI is still open. Noreen explained about the location at Pier 97. Also, I just wanted to add that in the RFEI, we had kept the berth location for the historic vessel open for Pier 97. So now that we have done more analysis, we realized that the south side is better because of the restrictions due to Con Ed operations. However, we still have different issues related with water depth requirements there, and also the duration that the vessel can be at a location. And we are currently in talks with DEC regarding these technical questions. And until we are able to resolve these, the RFEI remains open. And similarly for Pier 26 also, we are still figuring out certain technical questions. And so the RFEI remains open.
Thank you for that. Some hands I have seen go up. Louis, was your hand up on this topic, or did I miss you in the last round?
Well, basically this topic. You know, when you mentioned Chelsea Water side, it suddenly occurred to me that I hadn't thought about this for a couple of years, but wasn't there some talk about co-naming in favor of John Doswell?
Noreen, you're on.
Just hearing John Doswell's name makes me smile. I mean, it's a wonderful memory, but I don't think, Louis, that it ever reached that stage of a formal request from the community or from anybody. And I don't know that the eastern side of the highway, even if something were to be named for John Doswell, I mean, I think many of us remember him as a boatman.
Yeah, he was on the water.
Foremost. So the eastern side of Route 9A, I'm not sure that would be the thing that would come to mind for me, but officially from the trust, I don't think that that was ever an official request from anybody.
Well, if I recall, he was one of the people who instigated the building of that park originally.
No, John lived in Clinton in Hell's Kitchen, and the Chelsea Waterside Park Association was who instigated the original building of that before there was a Hudson River Park.
All right, I stand corrected.
Alan?
Thank you. So as a member of Chelsea Waterside Park Association, I put a plug in for Robert Trentline, if you want to co-name the park. But I did want to thank the trust, and I wanted to thank the design team for a very well-received plan on Chelsea Waterside Park, and especially for the dog owners, and to thank you for involving them and bringing them into the conversation. And a lot of what was recommended at a side meeting with the dog owners was incorporated into the plan. And I think everybody's going to be very happy with it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. Tom?
Yeah, I agree with Alan, and I would vote for the Trent Lyon, Corrigan, Kirkland name for the
yeah.
park.
Good names.
On Pier 97, what technicians told you that this was an issue? What marine technicians advised the trust on this relocation of the dock?
I'm not sure what you mean, Tom, but we have several licensed boat captains on our staff, including Carrie, right, Carrie? So we have expertise on our own.
Right, and this was expertise that wasn't utilized prior to the RFEI being issued?
The RFEI identified a possible spot and wasn't categorical about the spot.
I heard, and this may be untrue, and you can tell me if it is, because rumors are like navels, everybody's got one, that the trust had represented to Community Board 4 that dredging was not allowed in the Hudson River Park, and that was a rationale for limiting the number of people who could apply for that historic docking facility because there was no dredging allowed. Is that?
It's not correct that no
Okay,
dredging is
great.
allowed in Hudson River Park, and I'd be happy to answer this question because I know that people ask about it.
Great.
Dredging was not allowed in when we worked on the concept plan, the environmental impact statement, the general project plan, and the Hudson River Park Act.
I remember them all.
I knew you would, Tom, because I worked for you for a piece of the beginning of that. We always said no landfill, no dredging.
No, dredging for navigation was never no
Tom,
dredging.
could I finish, actually?
Oh, sure. Okay, okay.
So no, when
Sorry.
you look at the basic mantra that we had at the time, we talked about no dredging. However, the Hudson River Park Act allows dredging for navigation purposes. However,
right.
Yes. However, the environmental impact statement that was formed based on the concept plan and all the other documents that I named did not assess environmentally dredging. Dredging is a supercharged environmental issue in the harbor. It has happened. It clearly happened in Hudson River Park when the Intrepid had to come out. So dredging is an allowable use when it's for navigation purposes.
Correct.
Thank you. Right now,
And the passenger ship terminals are dredged regularly to keep them working.
correct, which are not
Okay.
in our jurisdiction, but,
Well, but they're in
the
the
area
Hudson River
between
Park,
Pier
just
97 and Pier 98 is another example of a place that is in our jurisdiction that is dredged because it's needed for navigation.
Con Edison.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. So that's where you could put a historic boat because it has a deeper draft because it's dredged regularly.
And we can't
That's okay.
because I was also in the room,
Differences of
Tom.
opinion.
Beyond that, I was in the room when the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and the State Historic Preservation Office and the Army Corps of Engineers worked on the programmatic agreement with respect to historic vessels in Hudson River Park. And one of the things that they were very concerned about was the placement of vessels, and specifically not having vessels be damaged. So we with everything that we do, if there is a place in Hudson River Park, or in any place in New York City, I'm sure, people have different visions for what they want it to be used for.
Sure.
And there are lots of uses, environmental factors that need to be considered, historic and cultural factors that need to be considered, community preferences
Political,
for
social,
uses.
economic. Yes, I
Right,
understand.
exactly. So I think that there is no mystery about what we're trying to do with respect to a historic vessel at Pier 97. We're trying to figure out if we can get one there. And right now, it would take years and money we don't have to assess environmentally dredging at that location, which has not been dredged in any recent memory, and to be able to get it funded as well, while we're still trying to get funding to complete, for example, the Hell's Kitchen section of the park. So right now, the fact that we're saying no dredging at this second doesn't mean no dredging forever. When I talk to people about the park here, I think of us as being kind of the first generation gatekeepers, Tom, in many ways implementing the exact vision that you helped dictate to me, that I wrote. I stayed overnight in your office at the time to help write the concept plan. And in many ways, we're still trying to build your concept plan, Tom. But that plan needs to evolve. Habitat restoration,
right.
Habitat restoration is another example. If you read that document, it doesn't talk about oysters anywhere. But now we all know that's something that we should be doing. So
Understood.
dredging, all of these things that we're talking about, maybe it's Gen 2 of Hudson River Park, but it doesn't mean like that we are against it or opposed to it or saying no way, no how, no ever. It's just not on the table for this RFEI.
Correct. Understood. And I just want to be very clear that without dredging, there won't be historic vessels in the Hudson River Park in the next 20 years. So if you want to take a long distance view, the long look down the road, even though you don't have the bucks now, looking at supplemental, at structuring something supplemental that looks at a dredging plan for the park that complements the restoration efforts and the education efforts. So you actually have some ships when you talk about what the waterfront looked like. You can't talk about, oh, this used to be chock-a-block with ships and everybody was doing this, that, and the other thing, if there's not a ship on the entire waterfront. You know,
I do want to move the agenda, but I would also note that from Community Board's 4 perspective, we just want a park in Hell's Kitchen. Historic ships weren't, we were happy that it was being considered, but we just need piers as parks, especially in Hell's Kitchen, but in Chelsea, the northern part of Chelsea as well. So it's a community balance, I think, as well.
No, I understand that. And my concern is that they're turning the on-water assets into restaurants rather than historic assets. That's all. Okay.
So
sorry.
I want to, Nancy, I want to keep us going here because we have 2 committee updates and some other items as well.
I just had a quick question. Is there any update on 257 on the construction there when that's going to open?
Yeah, Pier 57, we had been pre-COVID. You probably saw the signs, City Winery opening. You may have seen the ads. You may have even bought your concert tickets. That is tabled for now due to COVID. They are at this point hoping that they will be able to open. City Vineyard may open earlier, but we're hoping that the whole of Pier 57 will open in 2021 at some point. So there's been discussion about that. And we will, when there's an update on more specifics for the market and so forth, we'll be happy to tell you. You may remember there's an environmental education classroom that the park we negotiated for and that will be operating there as well. So before the estuarium, that will be the first new additional classroom space that we'll have in the park. That is strictly speaking for the sanctuary.
What about the office space there?
I think that's also 2020. I think that's also supposed to be 2021 and the roof and all of that. But later, like all the businesses, nobody's bringing back their employees yet, so we don't know exactly the timing. But I think that's later in 2021 too.
But the construction has progressed, and it's now sort of in the hands of the businesses.
It's a little hard to hear you. Sorry, I don't know why.
I have a crappy microphone still. I said the construction has progressed to the point that it's now in the hands of the businesses when they'll open?
The construction has continued to progress. They stopped for longer than certain of our construction activities, but the fit out and all of that, it's not ready to move in yet. But City Vineyard, I think, will be the first element of 57 that still hopes to open. and then the offices and the market and other things like that, and our classroom at some point thereafter. I'm not sure if that's your question.
No, I was asking about all of it. I mean, I'm thinking more these days about how it affects the bike path and all that, not just businesses, but I think we're going to get to that later. So I'm curious about that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all, and thank you to the Trust for those updates. Moving to the next section of the agenda. Friends, Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'll be brief. Friends volunteer, can everyone hear me? Friends volunteer program is back in a very limited fashion. We've started the Neighborhood Gardener program. We host it on Tuesday to Thursdays in different areas in the park, the Habitat Garden, the Apple Garden. We keep it under 5 per session due to the current crisis. Usually it's about 2 to 3 people. We had our first project a couple weeks ago. It began on Saturday. Volunteers also last weekend painted planters at Pier 83 and 84. We had about 5 volunteers. Our first green team will be on August 1st, and we'll also have about 5 or fewer volunteers. Green teams usually work on every other Saturday and usually have up to 60 volunteers on a normal year, but since clearly this is not a normal year, we have to limit the numbers for now. And all staff and volunteers follow the PPE protocols, including wearing masks at all times, sign waivers, and we place barriers around the work area so the public doesn't get too close. Another item, Friends, is still fundraising for additional seasonal gardeners. I know Noreen mentioned this. We provided so far funding for 9 folks and with special fundraising campaign, and our goal is hopefully 12 to 15 that will be funded. And the last item I wanted to report on is Friends is also part of a Parks Coalition of New York City open space organizations and parks like Central Park Conservancy, Brooklyn Bridge Park, and smaller parks like Fort Greene. Sadly, there's been budget cuts across the board. The city parks department cut about 14% of the budget. Good news is we did find new private funding available for park partners in 2021 from additional foundations, from the Green Relief and Recovery Fund. Some of that money is going to the gardeners. The coalition has also garnered some really good press lately. I don't know if anyone saw the New York Times article, I can send it around, on park equity and ensuring all New Yorkers from poorer neighborhoods have access to Hudson River Park and other parks across the city, including Central Park and the bigger, larger parks in wealthier neighborhoods. And we've been getting good press about how essential it is to continue to fund all parks, especially during this crisis, since it's been a place for our mental health and a place for solace during isolation. And that's my report.
Thank you, Tony. Congrats on raising all that money for 9 gardeners. It shows. So,
thank you.
Any quick questions for Friends? Okay, great. We are going to move into committee updates, and I'm going to kick it over for the bylaws. You received a memo from me when I circulated the agenda, giving just a brief summary of some of the sections that we're looking at in the bylaws. And I'm going to give it over to Wendy Pastor from Assemblyman Gottfried's office to provide a summary and update on that work right now.
Hi, folks. I'm not going to repeat everything that was in the memo because, well, you have the memo, and also because we're probably getting a little tired. But I'll just mention a few things. The first thing is, if you have any ideas or suggestions, please feel free to send them on to me and or to our chair, Jeffrey. And the other thing folks should know is where some of these ideas came from, which is looking primarily at community board bylaws. You know, that's been the most instructive, and just, you know, other organizations and committees. Some of the things that we're really making some change with is on the membership committee, what the membership committee does, empowering the second vice chair actually to become chair or secretary of the membership committee. So previously, well, this is not a done deal. These are suggestions that will be in, proposed changes to the bylaws. So right now, the first vice chair is responsible for attendance, but that would kick over to the membership committee, which is also going to be responsible for tracking attendance and knowing when to alert folks that, organizations aren't attending or that there's vacancies so that we can fill that space. That's been one of the things we've heard the most about, as is making sure that the advisory council is a little more balanced in terms of its park demographics. That is to say, where geographically or issue oriented the membership is coming from. One of the other things we're going to be working out is, how stuff gets posted, making sure stuff gets posted on the HRPT website, because there's a section there for the advisory council. That's pretty much it from me, assuming that you've got the memo in front of you.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, just one of the most important things is that the chair is going to be chairing for 2 straight years, rather than one-offing it every year, having a new chair, which we all believe will give us more continuity and allow the chair really to get comfortable and actually get things done. So just want to let you know that's one of the main issues, and I think Jeffrey will be a great leader for the next couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
There's definitely been a feeling, from all the, previous chairs that sometimes it's, it's too short. Plus the membership itself sits for 2 years, although except for this group, we're all sitting a little longer, but we won't talk about that right now.
Thank you, Wendy. Any big picture questions on this? I'm going to be reconvening the committee for some more review, but if you do have ideas or you're in other organizations that have bylaws that you think are relevant or make sense, share that and we'll keep this going. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Wendy. I'm going to give this next one over to Mary, and I'm going to share my screen also because she sent me her report to share with you all. And just to preface this, this committee, we had a couple of phone conversations and email exchanges, and I sort of encouraged them to think a little bit wider than the individual topics that it may have been started from, which begins to be explored in the introduction and goals. So Mary, I'll give it over to you for here.
Thanks. And I will also say that we were created like the last item on the agenda of Bob's last meeting. And Bob said, almost as we're leaving the room, Mary, will you facilitate? So we have talked about what we want to accomplish and what we think we should be doing, since there wasn't a formal charge. And the main thing we want to do is create action items and not just complain about problems. There have been some issues that have been discussed at the Advisory Council over and over for those of us who've been here for years. Like sometimes I feel like if I hear one more thing about electric bikes, I'm just going to shoot myself. But so we don't want to just keep saying we need to do something about the traffic on the bikeway. We want to come up with some recommendations about what can be done. And I think otherwise you can see all the information here about where we want to go with this. And our top 2 issues we felt were security generally, with an emphasis on improving the presence of PEP and any other security personnel, and improving communication so we're all better informed on what to do and what the problems are and note patterns that occur. And traffic, which I've already mentioned. The bikeway is a big problem because it prevents safe access to the park, but the bikeway is not under park jurisdiction. What can we do? How can we get people to the table? So I think often we're going to start with questions first to get some more information. And so that's what we did with the traffic issue. We don't want to just talk about it, but let's collect some information that can help us get to a solution. And so we're wondering if Hudson River Park or New York State DOT or some other agency might have data on incidents that have occurred on the Greenway. And if anyone's looking at it in a comprehensive way, lots of times we look at sections of the park one at a time without relationships to each other. Even the 3 community boards, I think sometimes they're only looking at their part of the park, and there isn't anyone looking at how the issue affects the entire park. And we've heard some from Hudson River Park about what they've done, but we have a new public safety officer. What's being done now to make park access safer. A lot of tenants are addressing issues on their own. Erica has told us about what the security staff at Chelsea Piers often does, just taking on themselves to make sure people cross safely to their facility. Some other big tenants are doing that. How can we capitalize on that and coordinate it? And the main thing is, how do we get these other agencies that the park doesn't have influence over to be at a table with Hudson River Park Trust and work constructively on the problem? And I think our electeds might be able to help with that. And we had a couple specific suggestions, but and we recognize that traffic can be slowed using bollards, which were put in for after the bombing incident. What else can be done to slow traffic? Because slow traffic makes the traffic safer, and accidents are less tragic if people are moving slowly. So that's a list of questions. I think right now, if Noreen or David or Deb can say who might best answer those, or if there's one of the electeds representatives who might say, I'll work with you on this, or I'll take this on, we could get some of these questions answered and then propose some solutions.
I can start. I mean, it would be helpful to have a chance to give.
I know you're getting this on the spot, and we're also all tired. So.
There is not a complete data set of accidents on the Greenway. It is, we track what we can. We're actually working to create kind of our own more centralized version of it. But a lot of times, you know, somebody might call 911 and we might or might not find out about it. Dennis and Deb have tried to work with the police precincts and things and are still trying to get incident reports that come from things that occur in the park. But the things, we don't have a full data set, and I don't think anyone has a full data set. So we can share with you, like that seems to be one of the main things. We can get back to you. I mean, I think it'd be helpful to have Deb and Dennis be able to kind of interact with you rather than just kind of a static set of responses. But
yes,
we're happy to give you what we know.
Yes, and I'm sorry I was misremembering Dennis's first name, but since we only just heard about him at our last meeting. But I think really it's just like who we can get the answers from. It doesn't have to happen in the meeting.
I also think that it's not, the answers are not often going to come from the trust when it comes to access to the park, to the Greenway. And I think, and Nancy and I were talking about this actually as well, of let's figure out, and this is a committee structure topic I wanted to talk about, let's figure out issues that are of importance to us during our council meeting. And at the next meeting, we send an invitation to a relevant agency to come and actually talk to us about it. And we get to ask those questions and hopefully get real answers. And then we can begin to make change about it.
Yes. And I think the main thing tonight, since this is the first time we reported, was to describe a framework for a process, not necessarily to get the questions answered right now.
Great. Thank you for that. Wendy, saw your hand go up.
Yeah. I was responding to something Mary had in her notes about, you know, getting this information. And while I imagine the trust has, well, I don't know, you know, I mean, Noreen, you said you've got a lot of the data. I don't know if you have the same as DOT and whatever, but, you know, I don't see why the advisory council doesn't write a letter to any agency that it wants to request data from. you know, Mary, I think the elected officials here are happy to work with you and write whatever letter whenever, pretty much, probably. But the advisory council is so much bigger than the local elected officials, in fact. You know, it's got, you know, city council minority, assembly minority, you know, Senate, all over the place. So, you know, I think that's something that the Trust Advisory Council should, you know, should look at doing, writing those kinds of letters in general more often, but certainly on these issues.
Exactly part of the whole this process. So thank you for that, Wendy and Mary.
I mean, one of the questions is how to get it heard, so that's really helpful.
Michael?
Yeah, I think again, I'm really I'm inching into being a valuable, you know, a worthwhile member of the council. But one of my noticings is I think comes out of hearing Mary's passion and I think some frustration with the follow-up to you know, anecdotal things. And I hear that there's a willingness to problem solve in the process that you described, Jeffrey, of you know, taking one step and then having that discussed at the next session with the people who can actually give the answers seems really smart to me, because it pulls back from the idea of just listing problems without solutions, which I think is a huge frustration. And there's some things that have been persistent. But as I come into this work and join this committee, I'm really thinking about hospitality. I'm thinking about access and welcome. And we had a great conversation today, and I think that there's a lot of shared values around looking at safety, you know, safety for everyone. There's an interesting article that was going around, I think it's probably on Grubhub, about the differences in different parks and enforcement of certain things. And there are words right now that are floating around the atmosphere, you know, like policing and enforcement, that are worth taking another strong look at. And I think taking a firm ground on the standing firmly on the idea of community. And so I really hope that the safety committee can become a place for more expansive conversations around welcoming people and how we can ensure that everyone feels welcome in Hudson River Park. I think it's more than timely. I think that it's worth spending some time discussing what we think that means. And then I'll end with, I feel like the priorities have been identified. The priorities are really security, traffic, and then a category that I think includes what I've talked about, which is just healthy community, right? A healthy park for everybody. And the priorities in security are really clear. And what I think we should do for each of these categories, data is wonderful. Everybody wants to make data-informed decisions, but we don't need the data to know, you know, really in a pragmatic, practical sense, what is happening and what we want. I think we should. I would like us to, because I don't have any. I'm listening to these conversations as I come in, and y'all have been involved. A lot of you have been involved for years. But I haven't. I've only been working for my company here for 2 years. So I would like to see in print a status report. The Trust and Noreen and her team have answers to all of these questions. And I hear them give them in meetings, but I think that they are the natural starting point. So for instance, in terms of security, there are complaints and there are issues. And so to go in and you know, it's like a death by 1,000 ducks to just go with all the problems. I think we should really look at what the approach to security is right now, and then see what is missing, right? I mean, and we should define what we think security means, look at where we are now, and then see what is missing. And if we put just those 3 categories on paper, you know, security, traffic, and healthy community, get status updates on each of them, talk a little bit about what we think the situation should be, and then problem solve. not just for individual things, but for the whole of the park. How should these things be approached? Because I'm really not, I don't think it's going to be useful for me for any of us to focus on just the individual problem. We want solutions that work for everyone throughout the park. And that's actually probably one of the main issues, is that when problems do get solved, they may get solved for one, but not for another. And the context may mean that there has to be some adjustment. So what I really would love as a new person is clarity about what each of those things are. I've heard it, but I'd love to see it just in print so that we can start fresh. I hope I made some sense, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that Noreen and I have been talking, figuring out reporting structures, which is clear that folks want. And, you know, I think we could have 90-minute meetings when we figure out how to make that reporting structure work. Because like Mary, you know, I was emailing with Mary on Friday, they had a meeting today. So it was on, you know, me as much as everybody else that we're just getting this report now. And likewise with Noreen, you know, it wasn't appropriate on Friday at 5 o'clock to expect full written reports of everybody, but definitely going forward, I'm going to do my best to make sure we're asking for all those things. So that way we can be having conversations, because we're already informed about the issue because we've done the homework, and hopefully be proposing solutions. Mary, is there anything you wanted us to take away from this evening in terms of a next step? Or we should take some time to digest it?
I expect that this framework, I hope, sounds good to everyone. But I would invite anyone who has specific ideas or issues that they feel like we might not be aware of to let us know.
And certainly, if you're interested in joining the committee, reach out to me and or Mary. You know, we want it to be encompassing, but also, you know, I don't want committees to become a de facto additional advisory council thing too, right? We want to make sure they have some specific scope.
Yeah, and I think the idea is to use committees to do some of the discussion and digestion outside of the advisory council meeting, so that we can bring more specific action items to the larger group.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Daniel?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, we've had safety meetings for the last decade that I've been on, and I applaud you for putting this all down in writing, but you know, we've tried to get the electric bikes off the bike paths, and we now know that they're legal, and it seems as like, I don't feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. You know, CB2's written, I don't know, 4 or 5 different resolutions regarding the bikeway. The advisory council has, if Bob was with us, he'd be very vocal about how frustrating it is. So, and Wendy's idea is good. Look for the data, maybe use the data as a mechanism in which to say, hey, this isn't working. And if we can use, you know, but anyway, it's just that it's the very first thing I started working on. Your predecessor, who was the CB, Dolores, was the chair of that committee many, many years ago, before she was chair of the Hudson River Park Advisory Council. And it's just very, very difficult for us to make a difference. And I applaud your efforts. I will do whatever it takes, but it doesn't seem as though the mayor or the governor is listening to our pleas for a safer way of a bikeway. It's very frustrating.
Thanks for that. Michael?
I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure I didn't misrepresent anything that I was saying or misspeak or give the wrong impression. I firmly believe that I hear the answers. First of all, I firmly believe that the park is safe. And I think we
don't think that's a debate right now.
Yeah, I'm not looking for huge reports. I always hear in these meetings that there are existing solutions and approaches to almost every one of these issues, but it's just not clear to every party. And I think the space for the safety committee is much more expansive than just talking about the bike path. I feel that it is, listen.
I don't think anybody, hold on, Michael, I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that sentiment.
Great. Then I really just want our colleagues at the trust, Noreen specifically, to not feel like we're asking for them to do a whole lot of work because I think a lot of that work has been done and it's really quite simple. And the pattern that you described is really the one I think we should just focus.
Okay, thank you. Noreen, does that, okay, thank you. Mary, thank you for this. I'm gonna circulate it to the full group so that way folks can have this document that you sent through, and we'll keep all this good stuff going. I need to find the right tab. Moving on to new old business on the Greenway. I threw it on here because, you know, it's been coming up. We sent those letters that we haven't received anything back from. I don't want to waste more time talking about the Greenway this evening, so I think I'm just going to leave it at that. There was a request to talk about the NYC Ferry expansion and Pier 79 use. There was I believe it was the scoping hearing earlier this year that a number of groups submitted testimony to. As some of you may know, NYC Ferry is cited to land there with service from Staten Island. And so it's an increase in service. And there's a number of questions and issues about it. Tom, is it something you want to run through now? Are there specific questions we can ask?
I think in the interest of time, I would just like to understand if the trust had responded at all to EDC's SDEIS for Pier 79. And if you had, if you could share your response with us, I'd appreciate it. That's it.
We did not do a written response. Rashi, however, has been talking to EDC for the past year, and we do share a lot of the concerns you raised, Tom, and have been promised meetings to discuss things. So as an agency, we are taking advantage of our ability to pick up the phone and say, hey, this is in the park. We want to talk to you. So we didn't write a written response.
If you do not get the kind of response you'd like, there are those of us from the outside who are not constrained by agency protocol and niceties. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that the St. George ferry route has been delayed to 2021. I guess that's something which if you, I'm not sure if people here know, but they were supposed to open in 2020, but now due to COVID and construction logistics of landings, they've delayed the opening to June 30th, 2021. So that's really the update from them. And yes, we are trying to get a meeting with them to sit down and dig deeper into some of the issues that are there for the park.
Thank you. You also, everybody received Tom's email about proposing a new Marine Resources Committee. Tom, if we want to give an overview, good. One of the things I've been thinking about though is I wonder if we think about above the water and below the water in terms of this committee. The brief you shared was very wide reaching. And I think it's important when we think about committees for them to have, you know, a real defined scope. So is there anything, happy to talk about it here, but given what we heard today and sort of more feedback you've heard since the original pitch, would be curious to know your thoughts on that now.
I just would like to better understand the structure of the trust staffing as it relates to the waterfront. And I understand that they have a robust and successful environmental education program. And as a formal environmental educator, I, compliment that. But the comprehensive look at the water. The water is the fish in it. The water is the quality of it. The water is the people on it. The water is, the more you bring people to the water, the more they want to know what's under it. The greater constituency you develop for the ecological resource that is the river. So I see it as one, and that may be too broad. And I'm perfectly open to guidance. And I just believe the subcommittee should have a small group of us who have our feet wet, who care about the water, who could provide support, advice, technical assistance, historical perspective, you know, the advisors from the advisory committee to assist the trust. And I think that, you know, I'm looking at the faces on the screen, and there are lots of us who know a lot about the waterfront. And if the staff of the trust is being shrunk due to budget constraints, then look at us. We're an asset. We're looking to bring, hopefully, our talents to help you. That's all.
Can I just say that, Tom, I do think that what you just said about, you just said, you know that we have a robust environmental education department. It's more than that at this point. And I do think it would be helpful for this whole group at some point, and two things. One, for us, for this team to come regularly to the advisory council meetings so that people can ask questions about science, and so that it's a regular report, just like safety or whatever else is. So that's number one. But two, Tom, I think what is not obvious, because we don't talk about it, but is the extent to which Carrie, Tina, Nicolette, Siddhartha, others are embedded in physical planning issues with our design and construction department, operations issues with Deb, and like trash and plastics, and the synergy that in fact this group has driven rather than reacted to is something that I really can't overstate. So we're totally happy if the advisory council decides to create a subcommittee. It's great, because we do agree that what sets Hudson River Park apart from all the other parks is the sanctuary. So we couldn't agree more. But I think, on the other hand, there is some more learning, even though we know we talked a lot tonight, that we think that all of you could benefit from in terms of understanding how we work within the trust to look at things. And I mean, it's real. They're not just teaching kids. They're really embedded in operations and design and construction.
I couldn't agree more, Noreen. And I've always believed communication is a two-way street. The more you hear, the more you understand. I think part of the problem has been a lack of information regarding the good work you're doing. And, you know, marine ecology is one thing, and it's a great thing. But this park was supposed to celebrate the freaking history of a maritime waterfront that made New York great over 200 years. It's also supposed to be used by fishers and boaters and swimmers and skiers and paddleboarders. And so it's more, you know, environmental education is important, and that's the roots I come from. But this is a park that's supposed to serve the recreational needs of the public and to respond to educating people about its historic role in creating the city of New York. So, you know, I see the water as having multi-dimensions, and I see that you're strong in one suit, but perhaps not in all. And where we can be helpful, I'd like to be helpful. That's all.
Well, if it hasn't come across that this is a park that has many people using the water itself for many and varied purposes, then something's wrong with not just us, but the advisory council, because we need to find a better way to communicate that to people.
Well, no, that people are using it is not a question. Is that people are happy into how they use it, that they feel safe in using it, like Pier 79. You're going to increase, every 20 minutes there's going to be a ferry coming from Staten Island to Pier 79. Somebody has already almost lost their arm at Pier 79. How are we going to ensure that small boaters and an increased ferry traffic coexist? That's an important navigational issue. That's not an environmental educational issue. And we're just looking to be helpful. We're not looking to be critical.
And I embrace the idea of more people spending more time talking with each other. I always do. I'm fine with that. I still don't think that, I think that there is real operational work that these women here on this call are doing, like you keep saying environmental education, and whatever the process and the solution is, I would like to make sure that people, the advisory council, understands that we're more than that. It's like, there's a lot more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to supplement just that, you know, there's a huge part of the operating model that we have here, you know, especially with our team, but the bigger team with Rashi and others is partnerships and collaborations, and we do so much of it, right? So we've built the boathouses, but if it wasn't for the non-motorized boating groups that help to program and then us working together, like the really robust relationship we have with Hudson Sailing and we try to develop with Downtown Boathouse and others. And so we're really, you know, like it really seems here like there's just a disconnect in the kind of information gap between what's going on. And, you know, maybe that's just, we'd love to try to get to, there's so many questions you're asking, from like the boating to the, you know, oysters, that, you know.
It's a very complex issue. And I don't hear the same kumbaya sound on the waterfront that you hear echoing off the mariners and the boaters. But we could just be hearing different things. I speak to many, many people, and I'm not constrained by being their landlord or the regulator or anything else. I'm just a guy who cares about the park. And I'm just looking to be helpful. That's all there is to it. Not casting any dispersions, not calling anybody anything critical, just saying we would like to be helpful. And there are a number of us who have a lot of expertise who would love to contribute if that's possible. That's all.
So what I
figure, I guess, sorry.
And we don't have to belabor this with everybody else.
What I think, a couple of thoughts on this, and then moving to, I know DeLay has a question for Noreen, but what I'd like to do is ask the trust over, we're not meeting in August, but we have a meeting on the books for September 8th right now. I put 2 future meeting dates on our agenda, and I'd like to ask that if we can have some more robust reporting in advance of September, the September meeting, around a lot of things we've talked about tonight, from what the team is doing that briefed on, and then what they were not able to brief us on. It could begin to be really helpful to determine how we can make sure, I think Tom's got a really strong point of making sure we're in the know so that we can be advocating for things that are good, bad, or otherwise with the trust, with our elected state, city, with our neighbors, whatever. I think that could be really helpful. Does that sound okay to you, Noreen and team?
Yeah, we are definitely fine with sending. I think it's a good exercise to send some kind of written digest of main topics. It won't be 40 pages long, but we will be happy to prepare something about the major issues that are themes. And as this, you know, if people have particular things that lend themselves to a report rather than a simple Q&A, and maybe there are some things that I'll say, you know what, that's better as a discussion. But I'm happy to do this as a matter of course.
I think that's great. And I think maybe this early one, if you want to provide some links, so that way you don't have to put all the information in the actual report, but you can link us out to the website. That might be useful also, so that if somebody wants to dig in on an issue that you guys have pages and pages about, they can go and do that themselves.
Just on the topic of the website, I know this is something that Tom has raised. Maybe by now, maybe by tomorrow morning, we've actually significantly updated our website to make it a useful tool when you're on your phone, because our old one was not. It was not set up to facilitate ease of access. And we have done a skeletal start of an improvement page for the advisory council. Very happy to have more, but there are sections that allow for historic information, for example, the history of the West Side, other things like that to be part of this new website that we are designing. So I think this relates to some of the themes that we're all talking about tonight. Please spend some time once you've seen it launch, and if you have ideas, you know, it still obviously has to be written from the park's perspective and with the park's style, but I think there is a way to get more of these stories out. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
I think that's great, Noreen. And just so everybody knows, I told her to go ahead posting the standard language that we had right now around the advisory council, and that we take some time to update that, sort of what we see it's like, and when we determine really what we want to be on there as a whole.
I did get rid of a couple things. Jeffrey saw it. I think Daniel and Bob had seen it too, but it no longer says we're accepting applications. It has a link to the current bylaws. It lists the current members. So there are a couple of tweaks, but it's pretty vanilla right now, and it can obviously be expanded.
Okay. Thank you for that. Tom, does that sound like a good next step for you in terms of let's get that information and see where we take it from there?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Delay, you had a question for Noreen? Delay. Okay. My comment about committee structure really was addressed in the previous, this is the final item in the agenda of what came out of the safety committee and the discussion around the other committee that was proposed. But basically, to develop some structure around these committees, and that, you know, this came out of a conversation Nancy and I were having. I don't want us to be an echo chamber. It's important that we understand what happens out in Hell's Kitchen as much as it is in Tribeca. But if it's an issue, I don't want us just talking about it here. Let's figure out what the problem is, invite somebody relevant to talk to us about it. And that's not always going to be the trust. I think it's really important to understand that, actually. And that, yes, we are an advisory council to the trust, but I think we're also advisors because we want a really good park too. That's something that's important to me in terms of how we get issues addressed. And I think there's a lot of levers that we can be pulling to make all of this a whole lot better. Any other questions, comments? The only other thing I do before I actually take any of those, if you have them, our next meeting is September 8th. We have one scheduled for November after that. I do wonder though, given the increase in topic consideration, I'm going to throw out the table, do we consider a once a month meeting for perhaps September, October, November, December? See what we get done, see what we can get through. Multiple people mentioned the idea of potentially increase in meetings. My goal would be, it would make them shorter also. Tentative appetite for that?
I agree. Shorter and more numerous.
Shorter and more numerous. Shorter and more productive.
I think it would help continuity and keep us focused on the critical issues.
Okay. Wendy?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. Noreen, I have a question regarding the lighting. Near Guns N' Roses, across the street from Whitney Museum, extremely dark, very, very dark. The lights are not working. And the blue light, I'm talking about the light of the park. Also, the lights on the railing, the blue light from Guns N' Roses up to south of Perry Street are not working. That's the question about the lights. Second question is regarding the sign on the floor. Remember, throughout the park, you have a name of the crossing street, which really helps to guide the tourists and guide us New Yorkers to see where we are in the park. Between Chelsea Piers and Pier 57, there's no sign. Also between the Barry Diller Park, the new park that's already being built, there's nothing on the floor. And I'm wondering if that's changed or you're going to put a sign there. Thank you.
Thanks, Delay, for notifying us about the lights. It's possible that the blue lights are part of in that stretch are temporarily off while the construction of the Days End sculpture is happening, but I'm not sure about that, so I will be happy to look. Gansevoort at the moment has solar lights that we asked sanitation to put in. We know it's generally dark on Gansevoort. Obviously, once we build out the park, it will have proper lighting. So is that what you're talking about, that on Gansevoort it's dark?
Yes, right south of Gansevoort, in that corner there.
Okay. I'll find out if there's a fixture that's out or not. I can let you know that. And
It is extremely dark. It's actually dangerously dark.
okay, thank you. That may be something our team is aware of or not. For things like that, there is a 24/7 number on our website where you can call in things like that. And that actually gets recorded, and people that were on this call see that. So I'm happy. I will obviously take this, but for all of you to know, that is actually a tool that is valuable, and you can report things in real time like that. So like we don't have the street names in every location. That was done in certain places. It's not been done in certain places, so it's not a consistent thing throughout the park. So I don't think that the specific places that you mentioned were doing that.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Noreen. Thanks, Delay. Wendy, closing comments?
I was just going to say that I agree having or scheduling more meetings is better than having long meetings because you could always unschedule them. So I think that we should definitely do September, October, November.
I will add those and share accordingly. The other thing I'm going to propose is I'm going to set up a Google group, which means it'll be one email address that you put in, and the email goes to every single person on the list. If you reply all, the email goes back to everybody. But this way we don't have 97 CCs in an email. It's much cleaner. We'll give it a go. If it's complicated, we'll get rid of it. But we have a cleaned up list that I'd like to work with. And I'm hoping I can give that a try. Yes, Wendy.
You know, I always hate those BCCs, and I'm all for that because I understand people don't like this, but it does make it harder, you know, to write to somebody kind of off thread. So if we all have a list, you know,
I should have said, you'll have the list, right? You'll have a list of the members, but to send them an email, you have to type in one email, and that's it. And it goes to everybody. And you can pull out names individually if you want to.
Okay.
I'm going to stop talking now. I thank you all very much. And any questions in the meantime, please get through. I'm going to share Mary's report that she sent through, work on this list, be in touch with some others, and our meeting next is on September 8th.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See you in the
Thank
park.
you.
Bye-bye.
Happy summer.
Yay.